Naughty Dog did not have to make a sequel, especially after the fact that they could easily mess it up, because the first installment of the franchise was phenomenal. And even though it had a controversial ending which sparked up discussions all over the internet, the story felt finished. Joel could live out his days raising Ellie in Jackson. That is a thought that brings comfort into everybody's mind. But fans of The Last of Us know that this is not the world that they live in. It's not a world of comfort because it's bleak, it's vile, it's disgusting, and its monsters are both human and infected. The world of The Last of Us lays forth one of the most accurate representations of our world in all of literature. And without the second installment to this franchise, the story of Joel and Ellie feels incomplete. Without the second installment to this franchise, the world of Joel and Ellie feels empty. Now, this video will contain major spoilers to both The Last of Us Part 1 and 2. And if you haven't played the game or are not trying to get the game spoiled, please do not watch this video, I beg of you. Now, the opening sequence to the game starts off by reminding the player where we had left off in the last game, with the conversation between Tommy and Joel. And Joel is explaining what happened at St. Mary's Hospital when they met the Fireflies. Naughty Dog here establishes the actions that Joel took at the hospital, and this lays the foundation of one of the core themes in the game. The first example of this is prevalent in the first Last of Us. When nearing towards the end of the game, we're introduced to a character named David, who is beautifully portrayed by Nolan North. When Joel was suffering from his infection in the winter chapter of the first game, Ellie stumbled upon David after hunting a deer. After a long sequence of combat trying to fight off the infected with David, this happens.
Make a pretty good team.
We got lucky.
Lucky? No. No such thing as luck. Now, you see, I believe that everything happens for a reason.
Sure.
I do. And I can prove it to you. Now, this winter, that's been especially cruel. A few weeks back, I sent a group of men out to a nearby town to look for food. Only a few came back. They said that the others had been slaughtered by a crazy man. And get this, he's a crazy man traveling with a little girl. You see, everything happens for a reason.
This is essentially the introduction to one of the core themes of the game. Your actions have consequences, because Joel's killings are not going to go unexplained in this world, and this is the reason to why Ellie was now a prisoner to a bunch of cannibalistic fanatics. In the second game, this theme is even more highly emphasized. Upon arriving at the hospital, Ellie was already prepped for surgery, and once Joel had regained consciousness, Marlene had told Joel that the vaccine can be made, the world can be saved, but at the expense of Ellie. In the process of reverse engineering a vaccine for the infection that has been spreading rapidly since Outbreak Day, Ellie would die. Now, Joel makes the decision of saving Ellie and taking her back to Jackson at the expense of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity of making a vaccine. But the things that Joel was willing to do, the people that lay dead in his wake, is a decision that transforms into major consequences in the sequel. It is not whether Joel's actions were justified. That doesn't matter at all. It is the consequences of him making that decision and executing it is what matters. And Naughty Dog does a brilliant job of bringing this point forward, because even as the player, when we are fully on board supporting Joel in executing this action, it still bears repercussions for the people that happened to be affected by this environment. The doctor in the first Last of Us, the one that's holding the knife and wants to stop Joel from taking Ellie, that what so seemed insignificant doctor actually has a daughter named Abby, as we find out in the second game, and his name is Jerry Anderson. Joel killed that doctor, and now there's one more fatherless girl in this already bleak world, and this girl still felt raw about it, and she wanted her revenge either way. This sadly ultimately led to Joel dying gruesomely at the hands of an iron club in the hands of Abby. When we first took control of Abby, we would not know that she would be the first person who kills off one of the most respected and loved characters in all of video game history. Before she kills Joel though, Naughty Dog does an excellent job at establishing Abby's innocence when you first take control of her, showing us that she is just another human who is just trying to get by in a post-apocalyptic world. And then going as far with us as the players, helping her survive through this desolate world and this set piece of her running away from the infected. Only to find Joel and Tommy rush to her rescue. The person that saves her will ultimately die due to her actions. The fact that she was not conflicted in making the decision in killing Joel after Joel had saved her just shows how much she was affected by the loss of her father. And Ellie was there to watch it all, which now sets off her quest for revenge, which sets up an identical revenge path to the one of Abby, which led her to eventually killing Joel. This at first at the surface level might seem like lazy writing and a cliche attempt at a plot, but we must not forget that The Last of Us is a story about its characters. Even the first plot of The Last of Us, an immune girl used to find a vaccine, may seem as lazy and incompetent, but it is the characters that make this story a marvelistic masterpiece. The deeper meaning, and most probably the actual meaning, to Ellie's quest of revenge is to emphasize another core theme to the plot. Joel killed Abby's dad, then Abby killed Joel, then Ellie now is attempting to kill Abby. It is a cycle that will never break if we as humans keep resorting to our primitive instincts. This is the second major message in the game. Neil Druckmann in this game keeps dissecting humanity further and further, like peeling the layers off a snake just to find the hidden colors underneath. And he displays it to us gamers on a technical masterpiece that is laid on a tapestry so realistic that it is inseparable from the realism that hosts humanity. And that is one of the core reasons to why this game had to have such realistic animations, artwork, and excruciating attention to detail. Because in order for these themes to be laid forth and its ideas and realizations to be taken seriously, the tapestry had to look like a mirror of our world. The penultimate chapter of the game, and personally my favorite chapter in all of video game history, is the Santa Barbara chapter. Ellie, as we saw, could not live in harmony on the farm. The death of Joel haunts her. The images are so vivid that even the gamers can relate to how memorable that scene was, because it was portrayed so beautifully aesthetically. But it was devastating. It was beauty in destruction, but the explanation for Ellie's bloody rampage on the world lies in the final scene of the game, which is a cutscene in Jackson of Ellie and Joel talking about what happened in St. Mary's Hospital. Ellie is still mad because she wanted meaning from her death in a world that meaning is hard to find. But Joel even says this.
You're such an asshole.
I'm not trying to.
I was supposed to die in that hospital. My life would have fucking mattered. But you took that from me.
If somehow the Lord gave me a second chance at that moment, I would do it all over again.
This was Ellie's last conversation with Joel. They still hadn't made up, and us as the players, seeing this final scene, the reasons to Ellie's actions throughout the course of the game just keep piling up, but this is the one that does it for me. Having had a fair share of experiencing loss within my life, and as of recent, the loss of my mother, closure is a privilege that not many people get when it comes to death. And the developers at Naughty Dog understand this so well, and that's why they weight this scene so high, playing it only at the end of the game. So then Ellie sets off to Santa Barbara to get her closure by killing Abby. Aesthetically, the environment in Santa Barbara is so stunning and lush, and it really feels like an island resort type that would really attract tourists. From the sandy beaches to the bronze-colored residential houses, there was a comfortability to it all. Actually, for me, this final chapter was very reminiscent of a Tarantino film, specifically Kill Bill. Ellie's rage mixed with the surrounding landscape and the hyped-out soundtrack coming out from the low-volume radio player. I found myself getting goosebumps and filled with absolute nostalgia, as for the first time I had finally understood that playing a Naughty Dog game is playing a movie. And when you merge this with the new and enhanced dynamic combat, you just feel like Uma Thurman chopping and dicing people. You just feel like a plain badass. After you get through killing a bunch of modern-day slave traders, you free slaves and they tell you that Abby has been bitten and that she's practically dead. But nonetheless, Ellie confronts her, cause both the player and Ellie still feel that raw rage about Joel's death, cause we will never forget. But then, we meet Abby. All those muscles that she had, the fragility of her body is echoing through our screen. And blood red is the new color to her skin. Then suddenly, somewhere at the back of your head, you feel mercy. But both Ellie and the player pushes it back because at the end of the day, we know that she killed Joel. Ellie unties her, watches her free Lev, who looks even worse, whilst Ellie just watches her put Lev onto the boat, and then she finally gets the guts to finally confront her. But Abby is tired. She's not interested anymore, but then Ellie threatens her to fight her by threatening to kill Lev. And then we are treated to a combat that, at least for me, was weirdly satisfying but at the same time painful. That Uma Thurman rage that I had dissipated and is now replaced by confusion because of the state that Abby is in. But Ellie has the upper hand and is now drowning Abby. And the image of Ellie's facial expressions in this moment is a picture that is forever embedded in my mind. Tears, anger, sadness, and hopelessness, and then a picture of Joel smiling, and then she stops, and then she lets go. And everybody goes their separate ways. Ellie goes back to the farm to find nobody's there anymore. Dina left her. Ellie then goes to her man cave per se to find her belongings, and with it, her guitar, which she picks up and she plays this very song. The weight that this song carries represents the whole plot in mere minutes, and its use in the thematic conclusion of Ellie's saga really echoes as a brilliant use of combining all mediums of art. The song itself was first played in the opening sequence of the game by Joel.
If I ever were to lose you, I'd surely lose myself. Everything I have found here, I'm not found by myself. Try and sometimes you'll succeed to make this man of me. All my stolen missing parts I've no need for any more, 'cause I believe, and I believe 'cause I can see our future days, days of you and me.
The song foreshadows Ellie's character path and the plot as well. At the beginning, Joel is singing it as a reason to why he did what he did, and even though Ellie doesn't know at this point the events that happened at St. Mary's, he hopes that she does understand that Ellie is all he had, and if he were to lose her, he would lose himself. But Joel dies, and this whole situation is turned on its side, and through Ellie's acts and murder and violence, we find that Ellie loses herself because she lost Joel. She abandons all her morals just like Joel did when he lost Sarah. She kills random people who weren't even directly involved in Joel's death. She kills Mel, who is pregnant, and she leaves a life of comfortability because Jackson is not Ellie. Joel is Ellie. They are so inextricably linked that she cares about nothing no more. The moment that Ellie lost Jackson, she had lost all hope of living. And just to push this point further, Ellie lost her 2 fingers fighting Abby as Abby bit them off, leaving Ellie with not even the ability to express herself in one way that could be a memory of Joel. And that is, she can't even play the guitar. That's why at the end, she leaves with nothing. She leaves the guitar, she leaves the farm, cause she owns nothing no more. She is nothing no more. But why did she let Abby live? Abby took her world, but she let her live? That doesn't make any sense. But it does. This is because Ellie realized what was happening. The cycle of violence was never ending. Joel killed Abby's dad, then Abby killed Joel, then Ellie now is attempting to kill Abby, and in those final fleeting moments in Santa Barbara where Ellie is in a state of conflicted superposition, she realizes if she does this, it won't stop. Lev will then try to kill her, go to kill Dina or Dina's child, and then on and on. The cycle of violence has to be stopped, and just because the world is over, just because the world is an endless chasm of pain, doesn't mean that humanity is over. This is why Abby lives, because she is a living representation of the hope that a better world can be built. The Last of Us world does not make sense without the second installment to the franchise. Because it's a world where good people can die like dogs, and evil men can die like kings. It's a world where consequences matter, and it's not a fun game in any right. It's not a game that's gonna give you what you expect, because our world is a world where good people can die like dogs and evil men can die like kings. And just like in The Last of Us, you don't get the plot that you want, in life you don't get the story that you want to die on. Nobody is good, nobody is bad. Everything and everyone is grey. And the only thing that we truly know as humans is that we just want to survive. And don't get me wrong, the game is fun because it uses its complex and realistic animations and its artwork and its dynamic gameplay to probe all of these socio-economical issues, ethics, religion, and to question the basic fact that the only reason compassion and empathy exists in our world is because survival is not the core goal in the 21st century. The Last of Us is one single game that had to be separated because it was too long. Just like Quentin Tarantino's Kill Bill, you cannot have Volume 1 without Volume 2. The Last of Us is a single game that has to be experienced in its entirety, both Part 1 and Part 2. And the second half of this dystopian fantasy is my favorite game of all time. And it should not only be placed amongst the best games ever made, but what this game represents is a revolution in storytelling that should be placed amongst the Tarantinos, Spielbergs, Tolkiens, and dare I say it, the Shakespeares. And to everybody watching this, I implore, if you haven't played the game, please play it. Pick it up and actually make your own conclusions about the game. And if you have and you still hate it, I implore you play it again with an open mind to see what the plot actually represents. The Last of Us is a game that should make all gamers feel proud, because I do, as it has elevated gaming to a higher stature, one that can actually be taken seriously in its depiction of modern art.